Now that we're in the desktop editor, I have left a link in the comments so you can go ahead and set up the desktop editor and Visual Studio for yourself and follow along with me. After we're done, we're going to continue from this point on. So first, I'm going to go over the various panels the desktop editor provides. So first, we have the hierarchy panel. Over here, we can see a list of all objects, including scripts. We can select them from over here. You can press Ctrl to select individual objects and retain previously selected objects, or you can click on one object, hold shift and click on another object, and it's going to select everything in between. For the second panel, we're going to go over the property panel. So to see properties of an object, you click on an object and then it's going to show you its properties in the property panel, and it's a good idea to give the object a good name to differentiate it between other objects, because this section is going to get crowded soon. And to make a script, you're going to go to the scripts menu over here, click it, and then you can click the plus button to create a new script. We'll be doing that in a bit. And you can add gizmos and shapes from over here, and there are various menus over here which we're gonna go over in future videos. I'm gonna start by selecting everything we need so we don't have to build it again. So I'm gonna select the lights, I'm gonna hold Ctrl, and then I'm gonna select the rest of the objects. And then since the button is hidden by the trigger, I'm gonna go to the hierarchy panel and select the object from over here while holding Ctrl. And then after we have everything selected, I'm gonna right click and duplicate selection. And then after that, I'm gonna hold this arrow and push the selection back. And now that we have a duplicate, I'm gonna start by removing the old script from the trigger. So I'm gonna click on the trigger, go to the property panel, and then I'm gonna set the script to none. And now we can create our own script and attach it to the trigger. So I'm gonna go to the scripts menu, I'm gonna click a new script, and then I'm gonna call it button underscore TS for TypeScript. And then I'm gonna press enter. And then to open the script, I'm gonna go to the three dots over here, click on it, and then I'm gonna open an external editor. After we have opened it, it's gonna pop up Visual Studio. And we're gonna start with this basic script that's automatically provided on start. So since you don't know anything about TypeScript, I'm only gonna go over the important parts that you need to know, and for the less important parts, just copy what I do and I'll go more into detail in future videos. So I'm gonna start by deleting the first line, and then I'm gonna delete the H, Z, and the period after it, and I'm gonna do the same thing for the one over here. And then I'm gonna go after the T, backspace, I'm gonna write the T again and press enter. This way we have it imported in a better way. Okay. I'm gonna start by going over methods. So for methods, they're useful because they allow you to run same code multiple times but with different inputs. So let's start by looking how to write them and the proper rules or syntax to use them. So first we're gonna give the method a name. In this case, I'm just gonna call it name. You can call it whatever you want. I'm gonna open two parentheses, and I'm gonna open two curly braces at the end and press enter. So now we just created a new method. As we said, this is the name of the method. Over here between the parentheses, we're gonna give it the inputs. In programming, we'll call it parameters. So we're gonna give it parameters. And between the curly braces, this is called the body of the method. You can give it the code that you wanna run, and it's gonna run it when you call the method. So I wanna go over a quick thing first. I'm gonna go over how to write comments. So you click two forward slashes, and then over here you have a comment, so code to run. So now when we run the name, we're not gonna pass in any inputs or parameters, and it's just gonna run this code over here. So this does not run automatically. To run this method, you need to call it first. So to call a method, you first need to reference the method, which is gonna be name. You start with its name, and then you open two parentheses, and then you end with a semicolon. The semicolon is optional, but I highly recommend that you use them since they make your code more organized. Now we're getting an error because we need to use the keyword this to fix it, and we need to have this inside the start function. Okay, so we need to use this because TypeScript is object oriented, and how this works is we have classes and then you can create multiple instances of classes. So to refer to this instance of this function, you need to use the this keyword. That's fine if you don't fully understand it right now. You can just use it right now, and you're gonna get more familiar with it in future videos too. So as we said, this is our own method that we have defined, and this is the start function that we start with. So the start function, it's automatically called when the game starts, so we don't need to call it. That's the unique thing about it. We also have another function that runs before pre-start, and it also runs automatically. It's gonna be called pre-start. So just write pre and make sure the S is capital and start, and then we're gonna open two parentheses, and then we're gonna have two curly braces. I'm gonna continue by deleting this line and the method we name since they're not necessary. Now we're gonna start by connecting trigger events so we know when the player activates the trigger. We're gonna start by writing this to refer to this instance of the class. Also, if you don't understand this fully, just wait and you're gonna get more familiar with it. And then we're gonna write connect code blocks events. It's gonna be the first one. And then we're gonna open two parentheses, and then we're gonna end it with a semicolon. And this is a built-in method that Horizon provides us with. And now in between the parentheses, we're gonna give it some inputs. So the inputs we're gonna give it, the current entity or the current objects. Objects in Horizon, they're called entities in programming. They used to be called objects in code blocks, but because objects refer to something else in programming, now we call them entities over here. So we're gonna start by giving it the current entity. So we're gonna use this dot entity, and then we're gonna place a comma. And now we're gonna choose what should we listen to, what should this script listen to. And by the way, this script is gonna be connected to the trigger. So we're gonna listen to triggers. So Horizon has a list of all events, and to access these events, we're gonna write code blocks events with an S, and then we're gonna click a dot to access these events. And the event that we're looking for is the on trigger. So we're gonna write on trigger, and we see over here that we have the on player enter trigger, and let's select that. For the last parameter, we're gonna give it the method that we're gonna call after a player activates a trigger. So in this case, we're gonna create another method, and then we're gonna call it player activates trigger, and we're gonna open parentheses, and then we're gonna write some curly braces. And for the last parameter over here, we're gonna give it the method. In this case, it's gonna be player activates trigger. We're gonna give it the method that's gonna be called once the player activates the trigger. So what basically this line does is it keeps a track of when the player activates the trigger, and then when this happens, it's just gonna call this function. As we said, this function does not call by itself. We have to call it manually. This is unlike the start function. It automatically calls at the start of the game. So to tell it that we're gonna run this when the trigger is activated, we're just gonna write this dot player activate triggers to refer to this function. And then the following code that I'm gonna write, I'm gonna go in detail more over it in future videos. Right now, just try the same thing. We're gonna write dot bind, and then we're gonna open two parentheses, and we're gonna inside it we're gonna write this, and make sure that you have a semicolon at the end. There is one very useful method that TypeScript provides us, which is gonna be console.log. Console.log allows us to log things to the console, which is right over here in the console. Make sure that you select the console tab. So to use this feature, we're gonna type console, and then we're gonna dot log, and then over here we can type anything we want. Now since we're gonna type a text, in programming text is called strings. To make a string, we're gonna open two quotation marks, and then we can type anything we want over here. In this case, we're just gonna write hello world. Make sure that you save the file by clicking Ctrl S. And then let's move this to the side, and let's go back to the desktop editor. So over here, there are a couple of things we need to make. First, let's go to the script, and most importantly, let's assign the script we just created for it to work. So under scripts, go to button_ts. This is the script that we're working on. And after we have this selected, go to the selectable in screen mode and make sure that this is on. This ensures that if you're on desktop or mobile, you can click E instead of physically touching the trigger like in VR. So now make sure that the word simulation is on, and then you can go to preview from here, and then you can go to the button. Let's clear the console by clicking escape once, clear, and then going back, and then now we can click E to activate the trigger. And as you see over here, we can see hello world. And this means our code works and we can listen to trigger events. So anytime the player activates the trigger, we can listen to this event and do some stuff. Instead of logging something to the console, I want to switch the light on or off. So I'm going to start by deleting this. And to get a reference to the light gizmo that we want to turn off and on, we're going to go to the props definition, and over here we can connect objects to our script so we can reference them. So I'm going to go between the parentheses, press enter twice. And then over here, we're going to start by giving the object we want to reference a name. In this case, it's going to be called light. We're going to press colon. And then we're going to open two curly braces. And then we're going to write type. And then another colon. And then we're going to write prop types. And then we're going to dot entity. And then don't forget to end with a comma. So now what this does basically, this makes a new variable or a storage for the object we want to reference, which is called light. And then we're telling it that the type of this light is going to be an entity. If you're familiar with Horizon call blocks, entities in call blocks are called objects, but objects refer to something else in programming, so we call them entities. So if we save that and then go back to the properties of the trigger, you can see that we have a spot to connect the light to. So to do that, we're gonna have to find the light gizmo in the hierarchy panel, which is gonna be this one, and then we're just gonna hold it and place it over here. And now we have successfully connected the light to that trigger script. So let's go back to Visual Studio. Okay. And now that we have connected the light gizmo, we wanna activate it when the player press the trigger. And over here, this method is called when the player activates the trigger. This is the one we've connected previously. So when the player presses the trigger or activates the trigger, this method is going to be called. And when it's called, we're going to turn the lights on. So to turn the light on, we're going to have to reference this variable, this light variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to say this dot entity, this dot props. And then this dot props refers to this section, refers to the props definition. So after this dot props, we can write dot, and then now we have access to the light. Then we're gonna put a period and then as, open two parentheses, and write dynamic light gizmo. So this basically says that this entity specifically is gonna be a light gizmo. And when we say that, we're gonna get access to specific methods for this light. So for this instance, we can turn off and on the light, but we cannot turn off and on other entities. So that's why we need to use this. When we use this, this says that this is a light, and light have different features than other objects. So now after that, we can press dot, and then we can set enable, and then dot again, set. We're gonna open two parentheses, and then we're gonna say true. What this line basically does is it turns on the light. Okay. And one thing before we continue, do you see how it automatically added a question mark over here? This is because we're not sure if this light is defined or not, because maybe we might have forgotten to connect it in the property panel. So the right way to do it, to prevent issues in the future, we're gonna check if this light is actually connected or not. So to do that, we're gonna see if the light is defined or not defined. So we're gonna use an if statement. An if statement allows us to check if something is true, and if it's true, we can run other code. So we're gonna start by using the keyword if, open two parentheses, two curly braces, and then over here we're gonna put the expression that we wanna test. We wanna test if this is defined. So one way to do that, if we just write this dot props dot light, And this check if this variable is defined. We don't need to write anything else. So if this .props.light, if this actually contains something, then this means it's defined. So we can run our code over here. So we can remove this question mark, and then we can hold Alt and the up arrow to bring it inside this if statement. Now we don't need to worry about issues in our code. And to make sure that we don't miss this, we can just write else. If this is false, or else, open two curly braces, console.log, and then we're gonna write lights are not connected, and then we're gonna end with a semicolon. So now if we go ahead and test this, since we have the lights connected, it shouldn't run this part, because this part is only gonna run if the lights are not connected, if they're not defined. So now if you make sure that the simulation is on and we preview from here, we can see that if we press the button, it works, which is great. But one thing to note, if you press it again, it's only gonna turn it on, but it's already on, which is not what we want. So let's see how we can solve this issue. So I'm gonna go back to Visual Studio. And to solve this issue, we're gonna keep track of its previous state. We're gonna do that by creating a boolean, which is basically just true or false. And we're gonna use a variable to store this boolean. So to create that, we're gonna start by giving the variable a name. In this case, I'm gonna call it is light on, and then we're gonna set it equal to false, because the light is not gonna start by being on, it's gonna start by being false. Also note how I wrote this variable. I'm using the camel case convention. So first letter is gonna be lowercase, and the beginning letter of each following word is gonna be uppercase. This is a standard convention that allows your code to be more readable. And to use this, we're gonna go down under the if statement over here. We're gonna make more space, and basically we're gonna have another if statement. So we're gonna write if, open two curly braces, and then we're gonna have else, and open two curly braces. So if our light is on, so if is light on, if the light is on, we're gonna turn it off. So I'm gonna grab this by pressing Alt and up arrow. So if the light is on, we're gonna set the light enabled to false, so we're gonna turn the light off. Else, if it's not on, then we're gonna turn the light to on. So I'm gonna copy that by holding Alt Shift and then down arrow once, and then holding Alt and bring it down. And then if the light is off, I'm gonna turn it on, so true. And one important thing not to forget is to actually updating this variable, since if we don't update it, every time it's gonna be false, so every time we're gonna be turning it on. So to update it, we're gonna use the variable name, which is gonna be is light on, and we're gonna set it to false. Since if the light is on, we're gonna set the light on to false, and then we're gonna turn the light off. And let's not to forget to put the semicolon. And if it was off, we're gonna set it to this dot is light on. We're gonna set it to true. So this way, if it's off, we're gonna update the variable to true, and then we're gonna set the light to true. And if it's on, we're gonna set the light variable to false, and we're gonna update the light to false. And this should be everything you need to know to make the button work. And now let's test that real fast. Let's make sure that the simulation works, and then let's go into preview mode. And then now if you click it once, it turns on, and if you click it one more time, it turns off. And congratulations, you have a full version of the TypeScript version of this world. And if you're new to TypeScript, go ahead and check out my TypeScript basics video down in the comments. See you over there.